The shocking news. Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. For Duggar family latest news update, please subscribe the channel and press the bell icon. The morning began like any other in Springdale, Arkansas. The sun was barely rising over the horizon, painting the sky in pale pink and orange streaks. Birds chirped in the distance, and the usual quiet of the neighborhood surrounded the Duggar property. But inside the Duggar household, chaos was brewing. Michelle Duggar stood in the kitchen, clutching her phone so tightly her knuckles turned white. The expression on her face was unreadable, a strange mix of disbelief and dread. She had just received a call from a neighbor, and the words still echoed in her mind. "Michelle, it's Jana's house, it's on fire." Jim Bob entered the kitchen, still half asleep in his robe. "What's going on, Michelle?" he asked, pouring himself a cup of coffee. Michelle's voice trembled. "It's Jana, her house is burning. They don't know if she's okay." Jim Bob's cup froze mid-air. For a second, he didn't say a word. Then he set it down on the counter so hard it spilled. "Get in the car," he ordered, his voice trembling. Now flames in the distance. By the time they arrived at Jana's property, the sight before them was like something out of a nightmare. Thick black smoke billowed into the sky, visible from over a mile away. Bright orange flames tore through the roof, cracking and hissing as wood beams gave way. Fire trucks lined the street, lights flashing and sirens screaming. Neighbors stood outside, covering their mouths in shock. Some whispered rumors already. "I heard she was inside when it started. They say it might have been electrical. Poor girl, she just renovated last year." Jim Bob ran toward one of the firefighters, shouting over the roar of the blaze. "Is she inside? Where's my daughter?" The firefighter shook his head. "We've got someone pulling her out now. She was in the kitchen when it started. She's alive, but she's shaken." Relief washed over Jim Bob for a moment until he noticed another figure in the distance. Wissmann, Jana's fiancé, stood in the driveway, his face pale and eyes fixed on the house. His clothes were covered in soot, and he was holding something in his hands, a small burnt wooden box. The loss. Steven walked toward Jim Bob slowly, his expression unreadable. When he spoke, his voice cracked. "Jim Bob, everything's gone. The money, the documents, my savings. I kept them here for the wedding, for the business. It was $540. Jim Bob stared at him in disbelief. "Steven, why on earth would you?" "I thought it was safe," Steven interrupted, his voice breaking. "We were going to buy a house together. All the paperwork was in that safe. But the heat, it melted the lock, destroyed everything." Jana, now wrapped in a blanket and coughing from the smoke, came forward. Her eyes were red, not just from the smoke, but from tears. She looked at Steven, guilt flooding her face. "Steven, I'm so sorry," she whispered, "that I should have checked the wiring in the kitchen. The old oven, it sparked." Steven didn't answer. He just looked at the burning house as if his entire future had gone up in flames with it. The family gathers. Within hours, word had spread through the Duggar family group chat. Jessa arrived with Ben and their kids, bringing bags of clothes and blankets. Jill and Derek showed up with food and water. Even Jinger called from California, her voice trembling with worry. Michelle hugged Jana tightly. "You're alive. That's all that matters," she said, her own tears streaming down her face. But Jana shook her head. "No, Mom. Someone else didn't make it out." The words hit Michelle like a punch. "What do you mean?" Jana's voice cracked. "One of my neighbors, Mrs. Latham, she came over this morning to bring me fresh bread. When the fire started, she tried to help me get the cat out. She didn't make it." The air around them went still. Even the sound of the firefighters faded for a moment. Steven closed his eyes and muttered a quiet prayer. The investigation. Later that day, the fire chief gathered everyone to explain what had happened. "The fire started in the kitchen. We believe it was caused by faulty wiring connected to the oven. Given the speed of the fire's spread, it's a miracle Miss Duggar made it out alive." Steven stood off to the side, staring at the smoldering remains. $500,000 gone in minutes. He had worked for years in the family construction business, saving every penny. Now he felt stripped of everything, not just money, but plans, dreams, and security. Jana walked over to him. "Steven, the first, no, it's not the same, but we can rebuild. We still have each other." Steven's eyes filled with tears, but he didn't speak. The silence between them was heavy, whispers and blame. The days that followed were filled with tension. Some family members blamed Jana for not fixing the wiring sooner. Others whispered that Stephen should never have kept so much cash in one place. Jim Bob tried to mediate, but even he felt torn. "This is the hardest thing our family has faced in years," he told Michelle one night. "Not just the fire, but the way it's pulling us apart." Meanwhile, Stephen's family in Nebraska called daily, pressuring him to reconsider the engagement. "You've lost everything," Stephen, his brother, said over the phone. "You need to think about your future. Can you really rebuild after this?" Stephen didn't answer. The funeral. A week later, the community gathered for Mrs. Latham's funeral. Jana stood at the front, holding a bouquet of white lilies. She felt the weight of guilt crushing her. If the wiring had been fixed, if she had noticed sooner, maybe Mrs. Latham would still be alive. When it was her turn to speak, Jana's voice was barely above a whisper. "She was more than a neighbor, she was a friend. I will carry her kindness with me forever." Stephen sat in the back, his eyes fixed on the floor. A breaking point. That evening, Stephen finally spoke. He and Jana sat in Michelle's living room, the fire crackling softly in the fireplace. "Jana, I need time," he said, his tone careful but firm. "This loss, it's not just about money. It's about trust. About feeling safe." Jana's heart sank. Are you breaking up with me?" Stephen shook his head. "I'm not saying that. I need to think." Tears welled in Jana's eyes. "You think I'm dangerous to your future?" "I think," Stephen said quietly, "that right now, everything we planned is gone. And I don't know how to start over rebuilding." Over the next month, the family rallied. Volunteers from church helped clear the debris from Jana's property. Jim Bob arranged a fundraiser to help Stephen recover some of his loss. Slowly, pieces of hope began to emerge from the ashes. One morning, Stephen showed up at the construction site where Jana was helping rebuild her kitchen. He was carrying a small wooden cross. "I made this from one of the beams from your old house," he said. "It's a reminder that even when things burn down, something can be built again." Jana smiled through tears. "Does this mean you're staying?" Stephen nodded. "It means we start over. Together. Moving forward." Months later, a new house stood where the old one had been. It wasn't as big, but it was stronger, built with better wiring, fireproof materials, and a community's love. Stephen's business slowly recovered, thanks to support from both families. Jana planted a garden in the backyard, dedicating it to Mrs. Latham. Life was different, but it was life. And through the pain, the loss, and the rebuilding, Jana learned something she would never forget. Sometimes the only way to truly rebuild is to first watch everything burn. The day the world stopped for Jill and Derek. The rain tapped gently against the hospital window, like 1,000 tiny tears falling from the sky. Inside the pale green walls of room 208, Jill lay still, her hand resting softly on her swollen belly, where just hours ago a life had grown, kicked, and fluttered with dreams of the future. But now it was quiet, too quiet. Derek sat at her bedside, his face buried in his hands, shoulders shaking with sobs that refused to be silenced. He wasn't a man who cried easily. But this was a pain that shattered every defense, broke every dam, and brought even the strongest man to his knees. Their baby girl was gone, stillborn at 38 weeks. Jill had gone into labor on a Sunday morning. Everything seemed normal at first. The baby had been healthy through every checkup. They had decorated the nursery, painted the walls a soft lilac, folded tiny pink onesies, and even recorded a video for their YouTube followers, sharing their excitement. "Her name was to be Hope Elise Dillard because we've waited and prayed," Jill had said in that video, smiling, her hand over her bump. "And no matter what happens, there's always hope, the beginning of the end." Contractions began around 6 a.m. Jill had felt a tightening in her back, followed by a flutter of anticipation. She and Derek laughed as they rushed to the car, filming little clips between contractions. The hospital staff welcomed them warmly. They were used to seeing happy couples come in filled with excitement, but as the nurses connected the fetal monitor, a frown crossed one of their faces. There was no heartbeat. Maybe it was a glitch? A tech issue? They moved the sensors, checked again. Jill's smile faded. She looked at Derek, who was trying to stay calm, trying to believe that everything was okay. Then the doctor came in. His voice was kind but firm. Jill, I'm so sorry. We couldn't find a heartbeat. We confirmed it with ultrasound. Your baby girl has passed. The room spun, Jill screamed. Derek staggered backward, his breath stolen by the weight of those words. Time slowed down. Everything else, the lights, the beeping machines, the sterile smell of antiseptic, faded into a blur. A birth without a cry. They still had to deliver her. That was the cruelest part. Jill, exhausted and hollow, was induced. Hours passed like shadows creeping across the floor. Family came, holding hands and praying. But no one could touch the pain that filled the room. And then she was born, tiny, beautiful, perfect but silent. No cry, no breath, just stillness. They wrapped her in a soft blanket and placed her in Jill's arms. She looked just like their other son, same nose, same mouth. Jill kissed her forehead, tears spilling freely. Derek stood beside them, cradling his daughter with trembling hands, whispering, I'm so sorry, baby girl. I'm so sorry. Grief in a hospital room. For hours they sat there, holding hope, memorizing every inch of her. Nurses brought a tiny ink pad to take her footprints. They took photos. A volunteer came in to make a memory box, complete with a lock of her hair, a hand-knitted hat, and a small angel figurine. Jill didn't want to let go. How do I say goodbye when I never got to say hello, she whispered. Derek didn't answer. He couldn't. His heart was breaking beside hers. Outside, fans and well-wishers were already beginning to send messages. News had started to spread. The Duggar family was well known. The cameras weren't there, but the world was watching. But in that room, none of it mattered. Aftermath: Jill was discharged 2 days later, physically healed but emotionally wrecked. She walked out of the hospital without a car seat, without a baby. Just a soft blanket they had taken from the crib. Back home, the nursery was ready. Crib made, clothes folded, diapers stacked. The scent of baby powder filled the air, and Jill collapsed on the floor, clutching a teddy bear, screaming into the silence. Their sons, Israel, Samuel, and Frederick, didn't understand. Not really. They had been excited to meet their baby sister. Now they just knew that mommy cried all the time and daddy barely spoke. Faith tested. Jill had always leaned on her faith. But now her prayers felt like echoes in an empty room. Why, God, she asked over and over. Why give us a child only to take her away? The Bible sat untouched on the nightstand. She stopped filming content for weeks. Social media turned into a blur of sympathy messages, and while many were kind, others were cruel. God has a reason. Those words cut like knives. Derek tried to be strong, for Jill, for the boys, but even he found himself yelling at God in the middle of the night. This isn't fair. We did everything right. We loved her. Rebuilding slowly. It took weeks before Jill left the house. It took longer to step into the nursery. Even longer to say her daughter's name without breaking, but healing, as it often does, came slowly. Like sunlight after a long, dark storm, she began journaling. Every night she wrote letters to Hope. Dear Hope, I missed you today. Derek started planting a garden in the backyard. In the center, he placed a small stone that read, Hope Elise Dillard, loved beyond words, missed beyond measure. They began attending a grief support group for parents who had lost children. There, Jill met other mothers, some older, some younger, all carrying the same invisible wound. In their stories, she found fragments of comfort, and one day she picked up her Bible again. She didn't find answers, but she found peace going public after 2 months. It was a photo of a small pair of pink baby shoes and a caption, Our hearts are shattered, but we wanted to share the story of our daughter, Hope Elise. She was born sleeping on July 14th. Though she never took a breath, she changed our lives forever. We miss her every second. We thank you for your prayers and love. The response was overwhelming.